Today's project is a DIY project. I found this amazing mural wallpaper by York Wallcoverings at Lowe's. And so I'm going to put it up on my dining room wall, and then I'm going to put a molding around it. Let's go. My first step is I'm going to clean the wall really well. I'm going to use 30% of rubbing alcohol to water. I'm going to clean it really well and then let that dry. Then my next step is I'm going to measure the wall and I'm going to find the center, and then I'm just going to mark that. Now I'm going to use my laser level. I'm going to set it up and I'm going to get a really nice level, and I'm going to mark that at the top and at the bottom. Now I'm trying to decide how I want the molding to work. So I grabbed a board and I'm just going to kind of test out what the molding is going to look like against the sides and along the top and bottom. Okay, I'm trying to figure out placement. I really don't want the electrical outlet, so I have the molding set above that, and then it goes up to, oh, it's probably 3 inches. So it's definitely more space down below. And then I have a board here on the end. This is about 3.5 inch board. So I'd have a 3-inch border on the sides. Need to measure that. I really want to avoid having to cut the wallpaper around the electrical outlet. I've decided to put the molding above the electrical outlet. So once I've determined my placement, I'm going to go ahead and start the cutting process on all of the pieces of molding. I don't have a fancy miter saw, but I only have 8 cuts to make. So I'm just going to use my miter box. I'm just going to make my 45-degree cut, and then I'll continue measuring and make the rest of the cuts that I need to make. So I decided to cut the molding first, and then I'm going to put it up on the wall, just tape it on the wall, and I'll draw a line. So there's a lot of different ways you can do projects like this. You just have to kind of find a way that works for you and for your brain. And this is kind of the one I landed on after doing some research. So it is a mural, so it's not a normal wallpaper. So I'm actually going to start in the middle. I've created my middle line. I'm going to get the middle of the middle panel, and that's where I'm going to start. And then I'm going to work my way out, and then I'll cut the excess if I need to. So that's where we're at. Since the top and the bottom are the same and both of the sides are the same, once I have one cut, I'm just going to use that as my template, and I'm just going to go ahead and make my mark and cut another one. Now that I have all of my cuts done, I'm just going to go ahead and tape it up on the wall temporarily, and I'm going to make a pencil mark on the inside. That's going to kind of give me a guide as far as where I want the wallpaper to be. So obviously it's going to be a little bit under the molding, but that's just going to help me see, okay, this is where the molding is going to be, so I don't go too far off. Now I'm ready to attach the mural. So I'm going to get all set up on the table. I need to determine what part of the mural I'm going to use because it's way too tall for my wall. There's a little house at the bottom that I want to make sure I get in. So I'm just going to make the adjustment, and you can see I'm just going to cut off a little bit at the top. I'm going to use that remnant piece to try to establish my center and my line on the left and right. So I'm just going to fold it in half, and then I'm going to take that piece and I'm going to line it up on the wall. It's going to mark the right and the left. And then from those markings, then I can take my laser level and I can go ahead and line it up with either the right or the left. That way when I put my wallpaper on, I'll have a really nice line so that I will have my first panel perfectly straight. I'm going to apply wallpaper paste. You can either do paste on the wall or paste on the paper. So I've chosen to do paste on the paper. So I picked up some wallpaper paste by Roman, and I'm going to try this one. I'm just using a roller and I'm going over the entire thing and evenly applying the paste. Then when I get done with one side, I'm going to fold it over on itself. That's called booking, and I'm going to leave it for about 3 to 5 minutes. Then I'll do the same thing to the other side, book it, and let it set as well. Then I'll be ready to try to apply it to the wall. So when I went to apply this to the wall after the designated amount of time, I applied it and I was like, this isn't very sticky. I had my daughter help me and I was like, okay, this isn't sticky to me. Is this sticky to you? And she's like, no. I was like, okay, well, I'm doing something wrong. So this is the first time I've used this particular paste, but it didn't work. So I'm going to switch to Zinger's Sure Grip. I have used it in the past on another project. And so I had a little bit left. I thought, okay, I'll try it and see if it works. So I applied it and it worked much better. So I had to go back to the store and get that brand. So I'm not sure what I did wrong with the Roman. I went ahead and looked at all the instructions to make sure I didn't miss something, but I'm not sure what I did, but it didn't work. But the Zinger did. I have my line set up already for level. So I'm just going to level up one of those sides and determine the straightness. And then I'm just going to work it with my hands. I like to use my hands first to kind of just work out any bubbles. I'm trying to make sure everything's lined up according to the laser level. And then I'm just going to start smoothing it out. So with this, it just seems like you have to just make little adjustments here and there. I do have a wallpaper scraper. Once I have everything kind of smoothed out with my hands, I'll come back in with a wallpaper scraper, and then I'll start using the seam roller, and I'll use that on the edges. So you just want to just keep working it. Don't be afraid to kind of pull it away from the wall and readjust if you have to. It's very forgiving. There's a bit of an open time to the wallpaper paste, so you've got some time that you can work it if you need to. I've even had to, at some of the points, pull it off, put some more paste on. So just keep working it until you get it as free of bubbles and creases as possible. Now I'm just going to continue and do the exact same thing I did for the second and the third panel. So this one, I did have some areas where I had to figure out where it lined up. I noticed that the pattern wasn't 100% lining up. And so you just kind of have to do the best that you can. You'll notice it a lot more when you're really close to something, but as soon as you pull back, you don't see it at all. So I am a bit of a perfectionist. I tried the best I could, trying to kind of work it, but the run was just a little bit off on this left side. It wasn't perfect, but sometimes you just have to do the best that you can. You'll see I just continue to take it off, adjust it, take it off, adjust it, and just kind of mess with it until you're happy. To determine where I was going to match the third one, the area that I needed to match was a little bit lower. So I just had to kind of put it over my head, kind of work on matching it up, and then I was able to trim off the area that I didn't need and then continue with the paste. So you can see I was working that center seam. I went ahead and just pulled it back and applied a little bit more of the adhesive just to make sure I had a really good seam there, because I was working it pretty good and I think I worked out some of the adhesive. So you can always add a little bit more if needed, and then just make sure if it comes out of the seam, just make sure you go back with a cloth and make sure you wipe it off. Now I'm ready to apply the molding. The molding that I bought came pre-primed, so all I have to do is give it a nice little scuff sand and then I can apply my trim paint. I'm also going to make sure that I sand down any of the raw edges that have any kind of imperfections on them just due to the cutting. Just make sure those are smooth, and then if you have any pencil marks, just make sure you just go ahead and erase those. That makes it a lot easier when you go to paint. For my paint, I'm using Ben's More Advanced paint in satin. It's a really pretty self-leveling paint, goes on really smoothly, and I'm using White Dove as the color. I'm going to go ahead and do 2 coats of paint. Advanced does require a 16-hour recoat time, so I'm just going to put 1 coat down. I'll come back and do another coat tomorrow. So to apply my molding, I'm using my laser level again. I had to get it high enough so I could establish my line. So once I have my line, I do want to make sure that it's adjusted so that the paper goes underneath the molding. So you have to be really careful. I don't want it to show through. I am going to cover up the wallpaper just a little bit with the molding. So I'm just going to go in maybe 1/4 to a 1/2 inch, and then I'll go ahead and trim back the wallpaper with an X-Acto knife. Here's where you can see I'm establishing my laser line. I want it to go over the molding just a little bit because I want that wallpaper to kind of fit underneath the molding. So I don't want it to be seen on either side of the molding. So I just want to make sure that I cut on a line where it's going to land right underneath the molding. Once the wallpaper is trimmed, I'm ready to adhere my molding. I'm going to go ahead and put up my spacers on the sides to make sure I have the correct placement. I'm using a brad nailer. It's attached to my air compressor. I'm going to go ahead and nail at an angle, kind of going up so that it really adheres it really well. I'm using my level just to make sure everything stays square and plumb. Then I'll come back with some filler and fill in all of the little nail holes, and then I'll do a touch-up. Some of my miter corners weren't perfect, but that's what caulk is for. So you go in and then you just put your caulk in, and it makes all of those little seams just disappear. I had 2 areas that the nail didn't go all the way in, so I'm just going to use a nail punch. I'm just going to punch them in and then make sure I caulk back over it, and then I'll sand everything smooth, and then I'm going to go in very carefully with a angled brush and do touch-ups on all of the molding. Then I'm going to go ahead and touch up the wall. I'm using Benjamin Moore Regal Select in matte, and this is also in white dove. I like to use microfiber. This is a 1/4 inch roller by Purdy, and I'll also cut in with a brush as well.
And here is the finished product. Doesn't it look great? I think it's a nice little statement. It ended up coming with 6 panels, but I only used 3, so I can use 3 somewhere else, or I can mount them somewhere. But I think it looks really good in the space. Now I have to decide what kind of curtains I'm going to put. I'm going to get a new light fixture, but overall, I think it was a pretty easy project. The molding around it, there's so many variations. You know, you could just do 3 panels and put the molding around each panel. I chose to do one really large panel because I'm going to use it as a staging wall. Here's some close-ups of the seams. You can see the seam there, how it's just a tiny bit off, but once you pull back a little bit, it just disappears. So there you see it, but then when you pull it back, you don't even see it. So it's so pixelated that when you just don't see them. But here's another one on the other side. Let me see. You can kind of see the seam there. But man, once you pull back, again, it just all disappears. So even if you're a perfectionist, unless somebody's going to like stand against your wall, I don't think they're going to see it. You can see even without a miter. I know I need to get a miter saw, but even without a miter saw, I was still able to do those very simple 45-degree angles. It only required 8 cuts, so it's pretty easy, you know, not too bad as far as all the cutting that's required. So very minimal tools are needed for this. Would you try this? There's so many different varieties of panels you could do. This stump comes in different colorways. I believe there's a blue, a couple different, this one's the teal colorway, but several different options. You might check them out by York. I got this one at Lowe's. It's one of my Lowe's finds, but excellent. I've been very impressed with the quality. But I do have one more question. Do you think I should go ahead and put the mirror on it that I had on the wall before? Tell me what you think. And thanks so much for watching.